Viewers, welcome to Hotline with Dookie on ITV. Today we are discussing International Women's Day, having been celebrated yesterday, March 8th. We are always given a choice of hopeless or fear, or a choice to move forward. This year International Women's Day theme, Give to Gain, underscores the principle that meaningful progress on gender equality requires deliberate contributions from governments, institutions, and individuals themselves. Our guest represents the Caribbean Center for Human Rights, attorney at law, Ms. Ria Davidson Mohammed. This Global Day honors the achievement of women and promotes gender equality. Ms. Mohammed, welcome to the program Hotline, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Anne, and thanks for that kind introduction.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. I'm a little bit tired because I spent
How did you celebrate International Women's Day yesterday?
Yes, so yesterday I would have attended an event put on by the Law Association called Fit for Justice. So in addition to being a member of the board of the Caribbean Center for Human Rights, I'm also on the Council of the Law Association, and I'm a member of its Health and Wellness Committee. And we put on that event as a way to commemorate International Women's Day and to show the tangible commitment of the Law Association to advancing the rights of women, particularly in relation to leadership. And the day before, I would have attended the rally and march put on by the NGOs of Trinidad and Tobago for the advancement of women. So I've had quite a packed weekend.
You had quite a packed weekend, yes, just like myself. Ms. Mohammed, I understand that you have a special, it is close to your heart to represent and to do pro bono lawyering for people who need justice, especially women, and improving people with disabilities. Tell us about your action in this area.
So I'm a member of a group called Carry Bono, and what we do is provide pro bono legal assistance to vulnerable communities. I'm also the co-chair of the Human Rights Committee of the Law Association, and one of the things that we're working on is something called the LAT Disability Project, which basically focuses on creating domestic legislation to implement the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And I'm also on the board of the CCHR, which has kind of 4 thematic areas of focus: outreach and awareness, litigation and legal reform, refugee support, and something called the Savings Law Project. So those are the ways that I've kind of tried to incorporate public service into my practice, because in addition to all of those things, I do have my private practice. So I'm in chambers with Mr. Ralston Nelson Senior Counsel, and I also provide consultancy services to PwC Trinidad and Tobago in their tax and legal services department.
How does one get access to Carry Bono?
So access to Carry Bono is usually done through its website, or you can reach out to individual members. So you can reach out to me, for example, if it is that you do want that kind of support. And what we try to do is provide strategic litigation support in different areas that might be needed throughout the Caribbean. If you need direct legal support, though, I really would advise you to get in touch with CCHR, because we do, as I said, a lot of outreach and awareness, as well as litigation and legal reform. So for example, in the past year, we would have had several legal aid clinics. We also represent vulnerable persons in relation to applications for protection orders, custody and maintenance. And through those 2 avenues of work, we were actually able to reach about 450 persons last year, which is quite an achievement that's deserving of recognition.
It's a significant number, yes.
Yes, and especially given the fact that in the human rights space right now, not just in the Caribbean, but throughout the world, we're really operating on very, very limited resources. Because I think as human rights practitioners, what we're witnessing, as I said, in the region and throughout the globe, is this kind of gradual rolling back of the rights that have been so hard won before, and we're not really seeing a prioritization of human rights issues on the region or global agenda.
The group is open to just anyone who seek help.
Yes, so our offices are located at Montrose Place in Chaguanas. It's free and open to the public. If you have some kind of a legal area that you need assistance with, as I said, what we mainly focus on would be refugee support and protection, the rights of migrants, women, children, and persons who identify as LGBTQIA. So if you fit into any of one of those vulnerable groups, you can reach out to us, and we will try to provide assistance as best as we can, even if that doesn't come from us directly, because we do have strong relationships with other NGOs and other entities who might be able to provide you with the kind of individualized support that you need.
Well, Ria, that ties right into the theme this year, Give to Gain campaign. It encourages a mindset of generosity and collaboration.
Yes, and I also think that that is a mindset that all attorneys who view law as a calling have, in the sense that I know that many people, when they think of attorneys, they basically think of people who are in the business of making a lot of money. I'm not here to discount that view because it does happen, but there are a vast majority of attorneys who are committed to public service, particularly in the human rights sphere. And not just attorneys as well. For example, our board is made up, it's chaired by Dr. Carolyn Gomes, who is a medical doctor from Jamaica, who has done human service in Jamaica and now in Trinidad and Tobago in the area of human rights. We have another lawyer in the form of Dr. Timothy Afonso. We have Dr. Catherine Ali and Camila Maureen, who work not in the legal spheres, but in other professions. So basically, the board has a very diverse background that brings to bear on the work that we do. And all of the work that we do is very, very much supported by the staff and the executive director, Mary Jo Marsden, who are not necessarily people with legal backgrounds. But what I have found is throughout the Caribbean, you do have persons in different pockets of influence who are willing to give back and who are willing to effect change because they understand that human rights, it's not a favor that we're asking for. You know, the human rights are the rights that we all have by virtue of being human beings. And we all have an inherent dignity and self-worth that deserves legal recognition and broader societal recognition as well.
Yes, and what some people need to understand is giving is not a subtraction. It is, in fact, it is a multiplication. When women thrive, we all rise.
Exactly, because, you know, the great irony in Trinidad and Tobago's case, for example, we have an anthem that talks about every creed and race find an equal place. Trinidad and Tobago is the birthplace of the all-inclusive FET, for example. But when you look at the society that we have, it's highly stratified. A lot of people don't feel as though they belong. A lot of groups are agitating for that equal recognition. And we all have a part to play in those conversations, you know, that adage, until all of us are free, none of us are. It's very, very much so an eternal truth.
Some people feel it's best to take no action at all. Mm-hmm. What would you say about that?
Well, I mean, I try not to be judgmental because people come from different backgrounds and they have different strengths. Doing this kind of work is not for the faint of heart, let me put it that way. But what I do think that we have a real tangible need for is a lot of public education. Because as long as I've been in this space, I've realized that a lot of people are not even aware of what their rights are. And if you're starting from that basic premise that you don't know what your rights are, it's difficult for you to conceptualize as to how you can advance your rights or the rights of other persons. So at CCHR, for example, we do a lot of public education. One of the big projects that we're working on is the savings law clause, which is not something that a lot of people are aware of. So we have a clause in our constitution that insulates a host of colonial legislation from being declared inconsistent with the Bill of Rights. When you look at those laws, a lot of them are highly discriminatory. So, for example, you have sodomy laws, you have laws providing for corporal punishment. All of those things are saved, and it's difficult for litigants to go to court to challenge them on the basis that they violate fundamental rights, even though we all recognize that we do. So to me, in doing that kind of work, you create an opportunity to build public awareness so that people know that these things are happening. And once they have that base of knowledge, you put them in a position where they will be able to move on to the next stage, which is advocacy.
Ria, I don't think some people are even aware of the Caribbean Center for Human Rights and the role that they play in all of this.
Mm-hmm. And yes, and that's why we're so grateful to you, for example, for being willing to use this platform to raise public awareness of the work that we do. Yes. We do have a targeted focus in terms of our social media presence, so that's something that we're working on. But as I said, it's through collaborative efforts with persons like yourselves and other civil society groups that we're going to get the word out there. All of us are operating under resource constraints, obviously, and I don't think that in the general sense, human rights is a topic that is high on our national agenda. So the way that I look at it and the work that I do is that I try to use every opportunity that is given to me to make an impact. And this kind of conversation that we're having here is part and parcel of that. And we really are so grateful to you for reaching out to us. I'm so happy that we were able to facilitate.
Yes, it will reach far and wide. Those who are not aware, after today, they will become aware. Is the Ministry of Social Development doing enough for women recognition?
Well, I think that the ministry has been doing a lot of human service. I do think that it's important that we've always had women's rights issues as a focus of that ministry. So I remember, in different iterations of the ministry, they would have moved away from that, and in response to public outcry, they would have revisited that position. I think that it is highly significant that 3 of the highest office holders in this country at this point in our history are all women. And I believe that you can't do this kind of work if you don't believe that things will change. I am mindful of the fact that we have a new administration, we have a new line minister. Obviously, there are a lot of issues that ministry will have to deal with. That social development portfolio is quite diverse, and there are really only so many things that can be done. But that's where I think that we have the opportunity to maximize in terms of collaborating with civil society groups, because we have all been on the ground, so to speak, doing a lot of the work that needs to be done. And if we adopt that approach of collaborating with the state and working together towards a common goal, I feel like there is really nothing that we can't accomplish.
Ria, if you were the Minister of Social Development, what would be one of the first things you would do for women recognition? And you are qualified. Don't tell me it is not possible.
I'm glad that you think so. I mean, I'm going to be a little bit selfish here, Anne, and say that the first thing that I would want done is for us to enact disability legislation. And I'm saying that that is a selfish goal of mine, and I am 100% willing to admit that, because I am the mother of a child on the autism spectrum. So my son is on the spectrum. I have a lot of family members, including my own mother, who has struggled with mental health challenges. And I think it's that lived experience of those 2 persons that have really opened up my eyes to disability issues. And there is a direct correlation between disability issues and the gender justice movement, in the sense that the discrimination that women with disabilities face is even higher than the ones faced by their neurotypical peers or their peers who don't have a disability. And there is a lot of opportunity for synergies between the women's rights movement and the disability rights movement.
So you were saying that women who suffer gender-based violence, that figure is higher?
Yes, it is. And the interesting thing, and I think this is something that people don't think about.
They are not aware of it,
No, and
because it is pushed under the carpet.
Yes, and also it's not just that. Persons who experience gender-based violence can acquire a disability. Remember, a lot of the way that gender-based violence manifests itself is through physical abuse, even though we all know that abuse is pernicious and it spans all different types of categories. But physical abuse is something that can leave you with a disability. And then you're left to navigate two different spheres, something that, in law we call intersectionality or double discrimination. And basically what that means is now you have, in the simplest of terms, two things that are counting against you. One, you are a person with a disability, and two, you are a woman. So in my view, there is, as I said, there is a natural synergy and collaboration that can happen between those two movements. And I'm happy that we have these kind of platforms to raise these discussions, which are things that we don't think about, but which, when we do think about, seem almost self-evident truths.
If you can save one life, you have done a good. I understand, like many women, as you mentioned on the program earlier, you also had to struggle and to rise above that struggle. What words you would say to women to never give in?
I would tell women that you are stronger than you ever possibly believe. The other thing that I would tell women is that there is way more support that is available to you than you will ever possibly believe. But one of the things that we struggle with, I think, as women is speaking up. Abuse is something that nobody wants to experience. It's something that a lot of people will not admit that they have experienced.
Of course.
It is also something that is so insidious that when you are being abused, it is often impossible for you to recognize it. And I think that is why we have to do a lot of public education about what is abuse. We also have to do a lot in terms of changing how we socialize children, how we raise them in terms of issues like conflict resolution. Do we educate them about human rights? Do we teach them how to treat people with basic respect? Do we teach them that every individual has inherent dignity? Do we teach them that they are put on this earth for a purpose? Do we teach them to lead from positions of love? Do we teach them that empathy is in fact weakness? We need to address all of those facets of different things. As a lawyer, I think it's easy for me to say, well, if we change the law, everything will change. And if we change, I'm not saying that law is not important, but law exists in the broader context of the society that it's designed to serve.
And that is why we need to incorporate all of this into our education system, so that the younger ones, they will know what their rights are.
Yes.
And they wouldn't suffer the same abuse that our forefathers have suffered.
Exactly. And I tell something all the time, Anne. I tell people you will be amazed at how differently people treat you when you are aware of your rights and you are able to articulate that. The other thing that I also tell people all the time is that this region, and I mean, I'm saying the region because we are at the Caribbean Center for Human Rights, so our work has a regional focus, even though we're situated in Trinidad and Tobago. Our region, if you look at the history of our region, violence and subjugation is very much so themes that you see running throughout the Caribbean. And we have to figure out as a society, how are we going to reconcile ourselves with certain hard truths? And how are we going to create a society where everyone is treated equally and where there is equity? A lot of people are afraid of having those conversations, I believe, because they don't understand that if you create a society in which everyone will strive, we will all benefit. It's not this us against them, which is how you do see a lot of the conversation. It's not just in the human rights sphere, but across the board going. We need to move away from that.
Ria, let's take a short commercial break, and when we come back, you'll tell our viewers, how does it feel to represent the Caribbean as Mistress Caribbean?
Thank you. Sure.
We'll be right back.
Are you renewing your motor, homeowner or business insurances shortly? Then call Kalyani Limited, Agency for Tatil, for a competitive quote. with 2 locations, Todd Street, El Socorro, and 5 Rivers, Aruca. Please call us at 221-5051 or 227-5051. Kalyani Limited, agency for Tatil, building relationships exceeding expectations.
Who doesn't love a good story? Science is no different. Breakthroughs in medicine, technology, or astronomy didn't just happen overnight. It's stories of lucky breaks, hardships, biases, serendipity, and tragedies. Even stories that make you laugh. There were battles of ideas, sometimes lasting hundreds of years and even thousands, until we got it just right. So sit back and relax, grab that cup of tea, and join me as we explore stories from science.
Welcome back, viewers, for joining us, and thank you to Ria for joining us in this discussion. In 2026, the world celebrates 115 years of International Women's Day, as the first day was observed internationally in 1911. Ria, before we went to the break, I asked, how do you feel to represent and to be Mistress Universe Caribbean?
So I'm very proud to hold that title. I'm the first woman to hold that title. Being in a beauty pageant and being a beauty queen has taken me out of my comfort zone, in the sense that I'm a very private person and now I have to live a more public life. But I do see how all of the life experiences that I've had and the professional capacity that I've had has led me to this moment. And it really feels serendipitous in the sense that the theme of Mrs. Universe, the international competition, which is going to be held in October of this year in Sri Lanka, and at which I will be the delegate representing the Caribbean, the theme is gender-based violence in relation to women and children. And as I said, that's something that I already have a lot of lived experience with. It's something that we work on at the Caribbean Center for Human Rights. So it seems like a natural extension of the work that I already do to be able to go to that pageant and represent the Caribbean in that capacity.
So it means a lot to you to deal with this issue. I understand gender-based violence is very close to your heart. It is amazing how women, Ria, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but throughout the world, how they still manage to hold their face straight up, although they are being abused.
Yes.
Would you expand on that for our viewers?
Yeah, so as I said, I think there's a lot of stigma attached to being abused. So, I can speak on it as a professional woman. You don't want to admit that you're being abused as a professional woman. And as I said, abuse is something that is difficult to identify when you're in it. Sometimes you need the space to step back. Sometimes you need someone to speak to in order for them to tell you, well, no, you should probably rethink this, or no, I think that what is happening to you is inappropriate. I don't know the extent to which we create those kinds of conversations, because there is such a stigma that is attached to abuse, even though it is an issue that affects every woman in every race, every societal background, every educational background. The rates of gender-based violence in Trinidad and Tobago, for example, it's very, very high. It's 1 in 3 women. So what that means is if there was another woman in the room with you and I am, one of us would have experienced this.
Of course.
Those rates are alarming. Even if you look at the rates of rape, for example, in the Caribbean, 3 of the top 10 highest rates of rape in the world come from Caribbean countries. The Bahamas, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines and Jamaica are the ones that are in that top 10 list. So we really need to sound the alarm. Something is going wrong in terms of how women are treated, how we socialize people, whether we do or have created a society where women are seen as equal partners and are treated with dignity and respect.
In sounding the alarm, Ria, are more women speaking out from your
I believe
experience?
so. I believe so. But I do think that a lot of what helps is other people being willing to share their story. That's why I'm so grateful that I've been given this platform. So, for example, I would have been featured in the Trinidad Express yesterday, and I would have highlighted the same things that I'm talking about in the interview, how much I'm committed to disability rights and eliminating gender-based violence. And so many people have reached out to me to say, I've experienced this, I want to help. This happened to someone that I know, which in a sense, it brings me a lot of joy because I'm happy to be able to be the conduit for us to have those kind of conversations. But it also brings me a lot of pain in the sense that it reinforces that statistical evidence. The rates are probably even higher than we think, because the 1 in 3 rates would be reported cases. But to me, just from my own personal experience and the unofficial statistics that I myself am collecting, it seems that the rates are even higher than that. And that is something that we definitely need to address as a matter of urgency.
Women are strong individuals with courage, forbearance, and so on. But given this notch, how do they get this strength to overcome these obstacles that they face? What do you think drives them?
I think that one part of the solution is knowing that help is available. So that's why it's important for people to know that organizations like the Caribbean Center for Human Rights exist. I also think that's why it's so important for us to fund NGOs and civil societies. We need to improve on the support mechanisms that are available, because identifying abuse is one thing. What you do about it is a completely different story, right? In terms of applying for protection order, which is very, very difficult. And sometimes that results in you placing yourself in direct harm's way, leaving an abusive situation. Do we actually provide adequate support for women who basically need to rebuild their lives from scratch? Do we have adequate shelters? Do we have, a simple thing like a woman who wants to go on a job interview and has had to flee the home of an abusive partner and possibly leaving her clothing behind? If she has a job interview, is there somewhere that she can go to get a suit for that job? Is there someone that will watch her children if she's a mother while she attends that job interviews? Those kinds of practical, pragmatic, on-the-ground responses are things that we need just as much as we need to do things like amending the Domestic Violence Act to ensure that LGBTQIA individuals come under the protection of the law. And I do think that we've been making a lot of strides in that regard. So, for example, there is a landmark case from Trinidad and Tobago by the name of Tot Lankin, where the mother of a daughter who would have lost her life at the hands of an abusive partner was able to successfully sue the state. And basically what happened in that case is she had a protection order and there had been repeated breaches of that order, and the police did not act with alacrity or at all, which resulted in her losing her life. She brought a constitutional case to the court, and the court basically said that that situation is a breach of her right to protection of the law. And we are hopeful because the decision was not appealed, so it's a high court decision. The Attorney General at the time did not appeal it. But when we have that kind of those kinds of cases on our statute books, what it enables us to do is create not only legal change in terms of how we view the rights of women who are abused, but hopefully also systemic change in relation to how the state responds to abuse.
Speaking about the rights of women, from my research on this topic, it seems that women and girls, they have just about 64% of the legal rights of men. Women, they are turned away, they are not believed, they are re-victimized and priced out of legal support generally. Equality never arrives. That is why I think some of them, they prefer to hide their situation rather than to face it head on.
Yeah. That is
Over to you.
that's absolutely correct. And so, for example, one of the things that I do want to focus on in my advocacy as Mrs. Universe Caribbean is how can we create a domestic violence act that is fit for purpose? So I think one of the most forward-thinking laws that we have comes out of St. Lucia. And what you see the St. Lucian legislation doing is adopting a holistic approach in terms of how we deal with abuse. And it places a lot of responsibility on the state because the state has to be part and parcel of this conversation that we're having in terms of putting the systems in place to both eliminate abuse, to address it when it occurs, and to support persons who have experienced gender-based violence. So I think that if we have those kinds of conversations, it's one thing to ask women to speak out, to do something, to take action. But if you're asking them to do that and you're not putting in place the laws and the policies and the practical support that they need, their voice is going to be almost like a voice crying out for help in the wilderness.
When women are turned away and they are not believed, what would be your advice to a woman like that?
So I would tell you that it is your right to ask that officer who's turning you away for his or her identification number. That is something that you can take up with the police complaints authority. And you can also take it up with the Commissioner of Police directly. If it is that you do want to apply for things like a custody order, maintenance, protection order, and you're in a vulnerable group, so you are a migrant, a refugee, you're a woman, a child, or a person who identifies as LGBTQIA, I would encourage you to reach out to us at the CCHR so that we could start a conversation on how best we can help you, even if we cannot help you directly. We will put you in touch with the resources that you would need to get the support that you need.
The police plays a major role in all of this. Sometimes they don't respond. Sometimes they will just respond and just run through the system and leave it alone. How can they improve this?
Well, that's why I think as public rights and human rights activists, we are so very hopeful in terms of the potential of that Todd Lampkin case. Because basically what it says is that that kind of apathy or non-response is a breach of an individual's right to the protection of the law. So really and truly, it should be a thing of the past, so that police officers have to take those reports seriously and they must respond. It can no longer be business as usual. I know that the police, they have, specific units dealing with gender-based violence, so it's not as though we're starting from the floor of having absolutely nothing in place. But, as with all things in life, there is always room for improvement. And the fact that that case has kind of shone a light on what is going wrong, and it has not been appealed, I'm hopeful that it would produce the kind of systemic change that we need to see on the ground, so that things that you are describing would be really, experiences of the past.
Ria, it's not only about women, men also need to step up their responsibility.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Yes, so gender-based violence is something that affects both men and women. The rates in relation to women are significantly higher than the rates in relation to men. I think that what we need to do is focus on how we socialize people, not men, not women, not people who may not identify with those specific genders. How do we socialize people in our society? Do we create societies where we teach things like conflict resolution, where we teach things like human rights, where we treat people with respect and dignity? And those are things that we have to see across the board here in all spheres of the society, from the top to the bottom, from professions to non-professions, from all of the different ethnic groups that we have, all of the different religious groups that we have. We really need to see a coalescing of interests, because when we have those conversations and give people those kinds of tools, it will create the kind of structural societal, cultural, and legal change, which is really what we need to put in place to eliminate violence across the board in relation to everyone. Nobody should experience violence.
No, and if, as you say, 1 in 3 women would have experienced violence, and that is only those who are speaking out. What about those who have been hiding it and sweeping it under the carpet? And sometimes you would know that it have been going on for generations in the same household.
Yes, so, just speaking for myself, every generation of every woman in my family has experienced gender-based violence. That is something that pains me a lot, but it also is suggestive of the scope of this problem. It didn't start today. It didn't start yesterday. It is pernicious and invidious. It is so ingrained in our culture. So one of the things that, I talk about is we seem to have some particular affinity for corporal punishment, yeah? So we believe that we must discipline children by beating them. But what are we actually teaching them? And we tell them that we love them, and that's why we're doing it. What are we teaching those children in terms of personal relationships? Aren't we socializing them to believe and conditioning them to accept that violence and love can coexist, or that they are two sides of the same coin? Those are the kind of conversations that we need to have. We can't just say, well, we need to pass domestic violence legislation, we need to amend the act to broaden its scope. Those are worthy causes, of course, but when we talk about affecting societal and cultural systemic change, we need to adopt a more holistic approach to dealing with this.
We need to change the whole spectrum. We need to take these things to the communities, to the churches, the mosques, the temples, the schools.
Yes.
And as you mentioned earlier, very important, how we discipline children is very important. Do we do enough? Are we training them to accept violence? Okay, I have a son. I don't believe in punishing children by beating them. I have probably never hit my son. And people will say, oh, I'm spoiling him, but I don't believe in that. But back in the day, I used to get licks sometimes. You get licks for schoolwork and so on, and it was accepted. You were taught to accept it back then. Yes. But times have changed.
I'm so happy that you bring that up because, I was raised in a household with a lot of abuse. As I said, a lot of the women in my family and generations of my family have experienced abuse. But one thing that I have to really thank my mother for is that she never hit us. Never. In my entire life, I don't know what that feels like. I know about all kinds of other abuse, but I don't know what it feels like to experience corporal punishment at the hands of my
never in my life I would accept that.
My children. And I agree with you. I am so happy that you talked about the children being spoiled because so many people have told me that. You have spoiled your children, you're not preparing them for the real world. And my response and what I tell them is that I have trained my children to believe that love is the place that you should lead from, and that love is the most powerful emotion in this world, and that love will always trump hate.
Of course. What a lovely and interesting discussion we are. Let's take a short commercial break before we return. We'll be right back.
In our lives, there are moments that need to be remembered. Are you hosting a Ramayana Yagya, religious or cultural event or celebration? Would you like to have it aired live on IETV or recorded for playback later? We will air your program on IETV and IE Radio with your viewers joining locally and internationally. Your family and friends worldwide can view on www.ietvtt.com or listen on ieradiott.com. To make arrangements, Call or WhatsApp ITV at 784-9880. Let us record your cherished moments and share it.
Welcome back, viewers. We are in discussion with Ria Mohammed. We are speaking about International Women's Day. In particular, at this point, we are dealing with gender-based violence. Welcome back, Ria.
Hi, thanks, Anna. Thanks for having me.
Yes, you're welcome. Before we went on the break, we were in the heat of discussing gender-based violence. Would you say that race plays a part in all of this?
Don't believe so, because from the statistics that I've seen and all of the studies that have been done, the sad thing about gender-based violence is that it affects everybody. So it affects people of different genders, it affects people of different races, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different cultures, different religions. So I don't know that I necessarily accept that race is a...
What about our culture in the Caribbean?
Yes, culture is definitely a big part of the problem. So as I would have said earlier, the Caribbean region has experienced a lot of violence, a lot of subjugation when you think about slavery, when you think about indentureship, when you think about the social movements that we've had across the region to ensure that everybody has an equal seat at the table. Social movements are still going on right now. So for example, in relation to LGBTQIA persons, we really need to effect a paradigm shift across the Caribbean in our culture in terms of how we view human rights and what do we actually think equality means.
International Women's Day 2026, it comes at a time when our justice system are under strain. Conflict, repression, and political tensions, they are weakening the rule of law. As an attorney, what are your views on this?
Well, I think that we have a lot of reason to hope. We have a new Chief Justice. One of the things that I definitely have to commend him for is promptly addressing the issue of judicial delay. So there would have been a freedom of information request that would have been filed by a citizen last year. Those statistics were released, and it shows that judicial delay and background is definitely a problem. And one of the things that I think he deserves a lot of recognition and commendation for is that he took it upon himself to issue a media release and actually apologize to people and to commit to using all of his time and efforts and resources to address that issue. We also are seeing, for example, the Attorney General piloting legislation that's going to bring on board things like a small claims court, which, when we have those kind of specialized judicial functions, is going to address the issue of delay. There's a lot of work to be done, but I'm hopeful that we can figure out the solutions to the problems that we have. We don't need to reinvent the wheel because the problems that we're having them across the Caribbean, and we can come up with collaborative regional approaches to solving them.
Ria, the Caribbean Center for Human Rights, is it based in Trinidad and Tobago?
Yes, so our actual physical space is in Trinidad and Tobago. We're at Montrose Plaza in Chicona, so it's very, very easy to find. But the organization has a regional outlook in the sense that we focus on human rights issues that arise in Trinidad and Tobago, but we try to adopt a regional outlook to the work that we do. And you see that a lot, for example, in our savings law project. So we would have actually put out an ebook educating the public about savings law clauses, and it goes into detail in terms of how those clauses are found in Caribbean constitutions and what can be done to them throughout the region, not just in Trinidad and Tobago.
But do you have people throughout the Caribbean reaching out for help?
So we do have persons in different Caribbean jurisdictions reaching out to us. Obviously, we won't be the first point of call if you need immediate assistance. And we are recognizing the fact that there are a lot of NGOs throughout the region doing this kind of work. But we do have that regional focus, and it definitely helps that our chairman is a Jamaican who, as I said, has done human service in the human rights sphere in Jamaica. And so we do have that kind of natural strategizing that happens in the work that we do.
Tell us some more about the Caribono. And
So
how does one access it?
So Caribono is a group that's founded by a group of Caribbean attorneys who have come together to do pro bono human rights work. It originally would have been founded through the university through something called the URAP project, which was headed up by two noted academics in the human rights sphere, Tracy Robinson and Arif Balkan. Tracy Robinson is now a professor of law at the University of Mona. Arif Balkan has since ascended and is now a judge on the Caribbean Court of Justice. So the organization is going through a changing of the guard, so to speak, in the sense of giving responsibility to younger members of the profession. But it is a group that you can reach either by viewing their contact information online, or you can get in touch with an attorney who is part of that group. And again, even if we're not able to assist you directly, we can definitely put you in touch with persons who can direct you to the resources that you might need.
Ria, I read recently where our new CAL chairman, she promises to shatter the glass ceiling. It is the first time in history that CAL has a female chairman in charge, Rena Kaulesa. Do you think many women feel that way today? They feel driven, that they can achieve much?
Yes, I do. And as I said, I am hopeful because there has to be a reason why at this particular point in our nation's history in particular, 3 of the top highest offices are held by women. We also have women leadership throughout the region in the form of persons like the Honorable Mia Mohammed, the Prime Minister of Barbados. In Grenada, they recently have the first female opposition leader. So what you're seeing across the region is women rising to positions of leadership, which definitely demonstrates that we are capable and we are able to perform once we're given the opportunity. What I always say, and that's my own personal belief, is that as we all rise, we have responsibility to reach back and pull someone along with us. That's how we affect the kind of change that we need.
Have you come across situations where women are still being abused in the workplace?
So I would say that the way that abuse manifests in the workplace is through sexual harassment. So at the Law Association, that's a project that we decided to take on because we've realized how the high levels of sexual harassment that happens in the workplace in Trinidad and Tobago. We don't have sexual harassment legislation on our books, unfortunately. And the Law Association, under the leadership of its president, Lynette C. Brunswick Senior Counsel, is committed to addressing that situation and ensuring that we have not only legislation but policies in place to address sexual harassment.
In Trinidad, compared to other Caribbean countries, would you say that is a higher figure here or lower?
I don't know that I have the data to hand. I would be surprised if it's higher. I would probably venture a guess to say that it's pretty much the same across the board, but I don't have the actual data to hand. And to be honest, I don't even know if the actual data exists because like gender-based violence, sexual harassment is something that is often swept under the carpet and we don't talk about it enough.
Is the Caribbean Center for Human Rights, are they associated and affiliated with other bodies internationally?
So yeah, we are the focal point for the UNHCR. We do get a lot of grant funding from international bodies like the Human Society Foundation, for example, which would have funded our Savings Law project. And so we do have that kind of natural, regional, and international outlook and outreach in the work that we do.
You know, in the workplace and in the home, there's not only sexual abuse and physical abuse, there's also psychological abuse, where it can take, violence can take the form, for example, of defamation, verbal insults and harassment. What would be your advice to someone experiencing that?
Well, one of the things that I would say is that if you're experiencing that, you do have some kind of legal recourse in the sense that our domestic violence legislation was amended to specifically deal with things like that. It even addresses things like revenge porn, for example, so that if you are experiencing that, you can reach out and get help, and that can be the basis of your applying for a protection order to ensure that it stops.
Women need to reinforce each other. Would you agree?
Absolutely. As I said, one of my mantras is until all of us are free, none of us are. And it's not just us women need to support women. All of us need to support each other. We're all in this together. And we're all going to benefit if we create a society that believes in equality and equity.
You know, I'm seeing some figures here. As you mentioned earlier, 1 in 3 is sexually harassed or physically abused. But 1 in 8 reported the incident to the police. 1 in 20 call a helpline or a victim support service. So there's a lot of work still to be done.
Yes, there is. And that's why I think that the work that you do and the work that we do at the Caribbean Center for Human Rights and at the Law Association is so critically important, because we're able to reach people and educate them about their rights and direct them to resources that they may need if it is that they do find themselves in harm's way.
Would you say there's a lot of stigma and shame affiliated with reporting abuse? That is why they hide it?
Yes, I believe so. On a cultural level, nobody wants to admit that they are being abused. There is also a lot of victim blaming that occurs. So, for example, I've had people tell me I've gone to the police station to report a rape, and the first thing that I've been asked is, well, what was I wearing? I've gone to a family member to tell them that, you know, I'm being abused, my husband is abusing me, and the first thing that I've been asked is, well, what did you do? You know, we really need to change the conversations that we have about abuse. We need to support victims. We need to believe them as well. A lot of people have a lot of fear that if they come out and say what is happening to them, no one will believe them, especially because abuse and violence can manifest itself in such hidden ways. You know, it doesn't only have to be, for example, a bruise that you need to cover up with concealer. It could be that inner psychological damage, financial abuse using electronic means, which are things that are so much more difficult to prove. And therefore, when you start from the standpoint of somebody reaching out to help and you questioning them and make them question their reality, that is not at all helpful. And all of that contributes to why we have this issue that continues to persist, and why people don't feel like they could speak out about it and seek help when they need it the most.
What does it mean that gender-based violence intersects with other forms of violence?
So basically, you know, in law, what we talk about a lot in gender studies is the concept of intersectionality. So, you know, we have different characteristics that make us more vulnerable to certain types of experiences. So, as I would have mentioned, if you are a woman, there are certain disadvantages that come along with that. If you are a woman with a disability, those disadvantages are significantly heightened. If you are a woman who is in a lower socioeconomic background, you have those two factors, not only of your gender, but also of your financial status or your earning capacity. Both of those things are operating against you. So that when we have conversations about gender, It can't just be in relation to, the gender in and of itself. We have to look at it in a collective societal context as to how all of these factors work together. And it's not easy work, but it is interesting, and it is definitely meaningful and valuable work to be done.
Is gender-based violence and domestic violence against women, is it the same thing?
So I think that what you will see over time is us moving away from the concept of domestic violence, in the sense that that suggests that violence only occurs in relation to certain types of relationships, as our understanding of violence and sex and gender have expanded. The word that, or the term that we now use is gender-based violence, because it's more comprehensive and holistic.
In the last few minutes of our program, Ria, one cannot move forward without statistics. As an attorney, you would know that. Is the Caribbean Center for Human Rights gathering statistics in all of these areas? And what are their plans for the future in promoting it and making it more aware to citizens out there?
So I would say that we're gathering statistics in the sense that we do keep an active track of the cases that come to us, the persons that reach out to us for help. So we do have that kind of quote-unquote internal data. We do want to raise the profile of the organization, particularly on social media platforms, because we feel like that will expand our reach and our impact. And we do understand that the world is changing and it's being driven by technology, and that a lot of people get their information online. So those are definitely two things that we have in pipeline that we're working on.
Apart from social media, does the Caribbean Center for Human Rights intend to go throughout communities and let the NGOs sponsor them and so on to reach out to citizens out there? Because I am sure there are many people, if they don't look at this program or they don't read about it in the newspaper, they would not be aware that there's a way out, that they can get help.
So outreach and awareness is definitely one of the pillars of focus of the organization. So we are definitely open to doing that kind of work. And as I said, we do have things like registration drives for migrants. We have legal aid clinics. We have, real needed help. So for example, one of the things we had was a back to school drive where we assisted persons and vulnerable groups with getting all of the things that they need to send their children back to school. So by doing that kind of impactful on the ground work, we feel like we're really in a position to make a real difference in persons' lives in a tangible way.
And Ria, all of this is incorporated in your role as Miss Caribbean, Miss Universe Caribbean?
Yes, it is. So I wear many different hats, but I am happy that all of the work that I do surrounds the two issues that I am most passionate about, one of which is the rights of persons with disabilities, and the other one is elimination of gender-based violence.
Viewers, remember you can contact Carrie Bono through or the Caribbean Center for Human Rights. You can access them online. You will have a chance to view this program on Facebook and on YouTube, and you can look for the information there. Ria, thank you so much for joining us. It is amazing how so many women go through abuse on a daily basis, and yet they can hold their head high up. You wonder if equality will ever arrive.
Once there is life, there is hope. That's my mantra. And I also want to thank you as well for doing the work that you do and shining a spotlight on these issues. It is much needed work. And I really want to applaud you for taking that kind of initiative to do that.
I thank you for joining us. You tell an interesting story here. This has been Hotline for Dookie. Join us again next week.